A soft question drifts in like a warm breeze. Have you ever felt the quiet comfort that settles over you when darkness arrives, like the hush of a fire crackling gently beside you, guiding your eyes to grow heavy and your mind to relax? Tonight, we'll follow that same feeling into a medieval evening, letting the calm wrap around you as steadily as a blanket. And now, with that soft breath, let's ease ourselves into the beginning of our story. Before we go any further, may I ask something simple? From which country are you listening tonight, and what time is it there as you settle in? Before we continue, if you enjoy soothing history like this, feel free to tap like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It truly supports this small channel and keeps these peaceful stories flowing for you. As evening settled over a medieval village, daylight slipped away slowly, not suddenly, the way lamps and screens make it vanish today. The shift felt almost like exhaling after a long day. Workers returned from fields or workshops, their steps quieter, their pace unhurried. There was no need to rush. Night gently reminded everyone that rest was near. The sky faded through deepening shades of orange and blue, and people often paused to notice it. With no artificial lights brightening the horizon, the sky's soft colors felt richer, almost comforting. Children might have lingered outside for a moment longer, letting the cool air whisper across their cheeks before being called indoors for the night. Inside small homes, warmth became the main focus. Firelight glowed softly against wooden walls, creating a calm flicker that shaped the entire atmosphere. The hearth wasn't just a source of heat, it was a place where families gathered, finding comfort in its glow. Everything about it leaned toward quietness, helping the mind slow down naturally. A gentle reminder, just to anchor your attention for a moment. You are safe, you are allowed to relax, and this story is here only to help you settle deeper into rest. Whenever your mind wanders, you can simply return to the warmth of the scene, the firelight, and the calm. As the final streaks of daylight slipped away, people closed shutters not to shut out the night, but to keep warmth inside. Wooden bars or simple latches settled into place with soft sounds that signaled the day was over. Tools were stored neatly, ready for tomorrow, and animals were brought into sheltered spaces where they would rest peacefully until dawn. The air outside grew cooler, carrying subtle scents of earth, grass, and smoke from nearby homes. For anyone who stepped outside at this time, the village felt quieter, almost suspended in a comfortable stillness. There was no rush, no bright noise, only the steady rhythm of life moving into night. Some households lit small lamps or candles, but these were used with care and simplicity. The lighting remained soft, never harsh, creating long shadows that stretched gently along the floor and walls. The movement of the flame would catch in someone's eyes, making them blink slowly as their body eased into nighttime calm. Families would gather to share short conversations about the events of the day. Voices stayed low, not out of fear, but because nighttime naturally encouraged softness. Speaking loudly felt unnecessary, almost out of place. Whispered comments, small laughs, and the rustling of simple clothing created a peaceful soundscape inside the home. Here's another soft anchor for your attention, arriving like a slow breath. You don't need to hold onto every detail. Let the story drift in and out naturally. It's the rhythm that matters, the gentle descent into rest, not the precision of the facts. Often, someone performed small evening tasks, maybe repairing a tool, brushing off dirt from garments, or preparing tomorrow's water supply. These weren't chores in the stressful modern sense. They were gentle routines that signaled closure, the final pages of the day turning quietly. As firelight continued to flicker, homes grew warmer. The glow bounced off pottery, woven baskets, and wooden furniture, giving everything a softened texture. Children often sat close to the hearth, enjoying the heat that soothed tired limbs. Adults moved a little slower, feeling weariness melt into calmness. Beyond the walls of each home, darkness settled fully over the village. With no bright lamps or electric lights, the night felt natural, like the world had tucked itself under a wide blanket. Shadows blended together, and the sky began to reveal the first faint stars, tiny glimmers that helped guide the night into place. Inside, people sometimes listened to the quiet outside. A distant animal shifting, wind brushing against a roof, or the soft settling of wooden beams. These sounds weren't unsettling, they were familiar. They were part of the landscape of night, as comforting as a lullaby for those ready to sleep. As you breathe with this moment, let this gentle anchor settle again. You are free to feel heavy, calm, and unhurried. Let the warmth of the medieval evening drift into your thoughts like a soft blanket being pulled over your shoulders. As the night deepened, the last glow of the hearth became even more important. Its soft light shaped the room in gentle amber tones, settling over the walls like a warm embrace. People moved slower now, their bodies naturally adjusting to the calm. Each motion, from placing a cup on a wooden table to pulling a simple cloth over their shoulders, felt unhurried, deliberate, almost meditative. Many homes used this time for small conversations that brought families closer together. Someone might recall something that happened earlier in the day, or mention a quiet plan for tomorrow. The words were simple, soft, and steady, spoken in tones meant to soothe rather than excite. The fire cracked occasionally, filling the pauses with gentle sound. It was enough to keep the night feeling alive, without breaking the calm. From outside, the chill of the air crept ever so slightly beneath the door. It wasn't threatening, just a reminder of nature's presence, a signal to stay near warmth. People sometimes added another small piece of wood, not to brighten the room, but to maintain the comfort that the fire provided through the night, by the permission of the one who allows all warmth to reach us. A moment to re-anchor. Notice how your shoulders soften, how your breathing slows. These scenes aren't meant to keep you alert. They're here to help you settle, to drift, to rest whenever you're ready. You can simply let the story move around you like a calming breeze. As hours passed, the village outside grew quieter still. Any lingering movement faded, leaving only the soft patterns of night. The sky overhead deepened into a rich darkness sprinkled with stars. Without city lights, the stars appeared clearer, steadier, and their glow provided a natural rhythm for those who occasionally stepped outside during the night. But most stayed indoors, wrapped in warmth. Inside the home, bedding was arranged with care. Straw-filled mattresses were fluffed, wool blankets pulled over them, and any small pillows adjusted to make the space comfortable. People didn't always sleep immediately, but preparing the bed was part of the gentle ritual that guided their minds toward rest. Straw rustled softly, adding another layer to the soothing soundscape. As families settled in, the room shifted into a deeper quiet. The fire softened to a steady glow, and voices faded into silent comfort. Someone might offer a final whispered thought, something lighthearted or practical, before letting the stillness take over. The night welcomed these final words with gentleness. A little attention anchor arrives again, like a soft tap on the shoulder. If your eyes feel heavier, that is completely fine. If your thoughts begin drifting, that is natural. The story doesn't demand anything from you. It's simply keeping you company while you rest. In the deepest part of the night, people often listen to the small, rhythmic sounds inside the home. A soft breath, a quiet shifting of blankets, or the slow pop of an ember collapsing in half. These noises were steady companions, helping lull the senses into calmness. They weren't distractions. They were reminders of safety, warmth, and stillness. Outside, the village remained wrapped in darkness. Paths, fields, and fences became shadow shapes, blending into each other until morning. Animals in nearby shelters slept peacefully, their movements slow and predictable. In this darkness, the world felt larger, but also softer, as if wrapped under a quiet veil. Inside, the last bits of warmth from the fire drifted gently upward. The air held a mellow scent of wood and earth, familiar and grounding. For many, this final stage of night was when sleep settled in naturally, without effort, like a slow tide returning to shore. Another soft reminder: allow yourself to feel the rhythm of this moment. You're not required to stay fully awake. You're welcome to drift, float, or wander gently between thoughts. This is your quiet space. As the night stretched on, dreams took their place gently, without urgency. People rested deeply, their minds emptying of daytime worries. The darkness outside remained calm, steady, patient. Inside the home, layers of warmth, soft breaths, and flickering embers formed a cocoon of rest. By the time the first hint of dawn approached, the village still felt wrapped in quiet. The night had done its work, slowing, calming, soothing. Soon morning would gently return, but for now, the world remained still, offering one last moment of deep peace before the cycle began again. The moment someone stepped into a medieval home at night, the first thing they noticed wasn't the darkness, but the warmth. Firelight glowed from the hearth, gentle and steady, spreading a soft amber tone over the room. Shadows stretched long across wooden walls, moving slowly with the flicker of the flame. The space felt enclosed, secure, shaped by simple objects, rough-hewn beams, woven baskets, clay pots resting near the heat. Everything had a purpose. Everything belonged. The home invited quietness, not silence, but a slower rhythm that encouraged the mind to settle and drift with ease. Families often gathered near the hearth, not out of ceremony but out of comfort. Sitting close meant sharing warmth, especially during colder months when the night air pressed against the walls. Someone might be mending a piece of clothing, their hands moving slowly, lit by the glow of the fire. Another person might be brushing dust from a wooden tool, preparing it for the next day. These actions weren't rushed. They had a calming cadence, like soft breaths, helping everyone ease into the deeper stillness of night. A gentle attention anchor arrives here, just to keep you settled. Notice how your breathing slows when imagining this scene. You don't need to hold on to every detail, just let the rhythm guide you. In homes this size, voices stayed low by nature. There was no room for loudness. Conversations flowed quietly, drifting between reflections of the day and thoughts about tomorrow. The warmth of the fire softened the edges of every word, making even casual chatter feel soothing, like a lullaby shaped from ordinary life. The scent inside these homes carried hints of wood smoke, wool, and earth. These weren't unpleasant smells. They were grounding, familiar. They reminded people that the materials around them came from the world outside. Trees that had been shaped into beams, clay mold into pots, fibers spun into cloth. Each object held a story of effort and skill, connecting daily life to the land in a simple, peaceful way. This closeness to nature helped nights feel restful, as if the home itself breathed alongside its occupants. Sometimes, someone would adjust the fire, just a small movement, the placement of a new piece of wood, or the gentle shift of embers to help them burn more evenly. The crackle that followed filled the room with a soft sound that comforted everyone. Firelight reflected off nearby surfaces with a shimmer, making clay pots glow faintly and casting tiny sparks of color onto the floor. These flickers weren't bright. They were calming, steady enough to help heavy eyes grow heavier still, guiding minds toward rest. Here comes another soft microloop anchor. If your thoughts drift, it's perfectly fine. Let the imagery move like slow waves. Even in the medieval night, drifting thoughts were common. People often sat in quiet moments when nothing needed to be said. The calmness encouraged reflection, sometimes practical, sometimes emotional, sometimes nothing more than appreciating the warmth. These pauses weren't awkward, they were expected. Nighttime was allowed to be still. Children often settled closer to the hearth than adults. The warmth helped them relax after a day of running, learning, and helping with small tasks. Their conversations were shorter now, their words softer. The glow of the fire on their faces made their expressions gentler, more relaxed. Their eyes would droop slowly as the warmth soothed them, unconsciously preparing their bodies for sleep while adults finished the last tasks of the day. Adults, too, felt the pull of the night. After a day filled with physical work, harvesting, crafting, tending to animals, or repairing things, night brought a slowing of the body. Muscles unwound gradually, and the warmth from the fire eased the lingering tension. Sitting near the hearth allowed their mind to shift from labor to rest. No need for entertainment, no need for distraction, just the natural rhythm of quiet hours taking their place. Despite the simplicity of these homes, they held a sense of safety. The thick walls, the familiar layout, the predictable sounds of family members moving or settling into their spaces, all of it created an environment where rest felt natural. People didn't require absolute silence to sleep. They embraced the subtle sounds around them, letting them form a comforting backdrop for drifting thoughts and heavy eyelids. In some homes, small items were positioned near the hearth to keep them warm overnight. Simple meals for the next day, cloths that needed drying, or tools that might become brittle if left in the cold. These placements weren't about convenience alone. They were rituals shaped over generations, reminders that even minor tasks held meaning in the flow of daily life. The home worked with the family, each supporting the other. Another soft anchor settles here. Your mind might wander, and that's welcome. Let it drift like smoke rising from the hearth. As the night deepened, people often stretched their legs toward the fire, letting warmth soak into tired feet. The glow highlighted the texture of woven clothing, the lines etched by daily work, and the ease settling across their faces. Even without speaking, the room felt full of warmth, full of presence, full of calm. For many, this was a moment to slowly unwind knots of thought. The home's atmosphere offered permission to think at a gentler pace. Worries loosened, replaced by the tangible comfort of the fire. Shadows moved across the room in slow arcs, creating patterns that encouraged the eyes to soften. Nothing demanded attention sharply. The entire scene existed to ease the mind toward sleep. Even with limited space, there was a sense of closeness that felt natural. People accepted the nearness of others, the shared warmth, the shared breath of the room. This closeness wasn't merely practical, it was comforting. It reminded everyone that night was a collective experience, lived together in safety, in warmth, and in familiarity. Outside, faint sounds filtered into the home. A breeze brushing against a wooden shutter, the distant movement of an animal settling into its resting place, or the soft rustle of leaves. These were not interruptions. They were gentle reminders that the world outside was settling, too, finding its own quiet rhythm. Inside the home, the fire continued its soft dance, anchoring everyone in the warmth of the moment. If your eyelids feel heavier now, let them. This is another small attention anchor, helping you drift deeper. In these medieval homes, rest came naturally, invited by warmth, routine, and the gentle movements of night. Nothing pushed, nothing hurried. The home simply held everyone in a quiet embrace, guiding them gradually toward sleep. As the night deepened, families gradually shifted from evening tasks to preparing their resting spaces. Straw mattresses were pulled closer to the warmest part of the room, and blankets were shaken gently to let air fill their fibers. The rustling created a soft, calming sound that blended with the faint crackle of the hearth. People arranged their bedding with care not out of luxury, but because comfort mattered when the night brought long hours of rest. Even simple materials like straw and wool felt soothing when warmed by the firelight, and these small preparations created a sense of winding down, layer by layer. Faint shadows stretched across the floor as the fire settled into a quieter burn. Embers glowed beneath the wood, casting a gentle red light that made the room appear even softer. The warmth curled around the walls, softening the room's edges and inviting the body to let go of the day's weight. Someone might place a final piece of wood to keep the fire alive through the coldest stretch of night. The glow that followed wasn't bright. It was steady, a quiet presence that eased tired minds into stillness. A gentle microloop anchor arrives here. If your thoughts start drifting, it's completely natural. You can let them drift as easily as a shadow moving across the room. In this part of the night, conversation usually faded. People spoke less not because of rules or expectations, but because the body understood it was time to rest. Voices dropped to whispers, then settled into silence, replaced by the subtle sounds of breathing, shifting blankets, and the occasional soft pop from a fire. The sense of calm in these homes wasn't forced. It developed naturally through routine. Daily work shaped the rhythm of life so strongly that by nightfall, bodies welcomed the stillness. Light from the hearth danced faintly on clay jars, wooden bowls, and woven baskets. These simple items reflected small glimmers of orange and red, creating a kind of living artwork that shifted slowly as the flames changed shape. Watching these movements could easily lull someone into a trance-like calm, encouraging sleep to come gently. The home itself played a role in creating comfort. Thick wooden beams overhead absorbed the warmth, releasing it slowly as the hours passed. Walls made from timber or earth held onto the day's heat, allowing the air inside to stay mild even as the world outside cooled. Every structure, every material offered some benefit by the permission of the one who grants usefulness to all things. This natural cooperation between home and warmth made nighttime feel safe and sheltered. Another soft reminder settles in. You don't need to stay alert. Let the story drift around you like a slow-moving river. Outside, the village slept in near total darkness. The only light visible through small cracks in shutters came from the faint glow of hearths inside neighboring homes. Occasionally, a quiet animal sound rolled through the stillness, an ever-present reminder of life beyond the walls, calm and predictable. These sounds, along with the steady hush of the wind, helped create a soundtrack that encouraged deeper rest. Inside, people shifted into the most comfortable positions they could manage on their straw beds. Children curled up close together, sharing warmth. Adults stretched their legs beneath wool blankets, allowing heat from the fire to touch their feet. In this moment, the room felt full without being loud, a space where peacefulness took up every corner. Eyelids grew heavier, and breath slowed into a collective rhythm shared by everyone inside. It was common for someone to stay awake a little longer than the rest, tending the fire or simply watching its quiet glow. Not out of duty or fear, but because the calmness made wakefulness feel different, softened, unpressured. Sitting beside the hearth in these late hours offered a moment of gentle reflection. Shadows played across the floor in long shapes, drifting slowly as firelight ebbed and flowed. This scene alone could soothe even the busiest mind. As night stretched further, the fire settled into its final stage, where embers glowed steadily and flames lowered to thin, wavering shapes. The air inside remained warm enough to encourage rest, yet cool enough to feel refreshing. The quiet was deep now, wrapping itself around everyone in the home like a comforting blanket. Every sound was softer, the breathing, the shifting of cloth, the settling of wood in the hearth. Another microloop anchor arrives, soft as a whisper. If your eyes grow heavier, allow them to. This story isn't meant to be followed perfectly. It's here to guide you gently into rest. In the slowest hours of the night, dreams often took shape quietly. People drifted naturally into them, without forcing anything. The rhythm of the room, the warmth, the darkness, the familiarity, allowed sleep to come like a slow tide. Outside, stars glimmered in the sky, untouched by the brightness of modern lights. They offered just enough glow to make the darkness feel peaceful rather than empty. Inside, the home's warmth created a small world of its own, separate from the coolness of the night outside. The contrast made the home feel even safer, even more inviting. It was a space designed for rest, shaped by daily habits and the soothing presence of firelight. By the time the entire home settled into deep sleep, the night felt complete. Calmness filled every corner, from the quiet breathing of children to the faint hum of the embers. Nothing demanded attention. Nothing rushed. The world paused gently, waiting for morning. This softness carried the family through the night, holding them in a comforting embrace until the first hints of dawn slowly returned to the sky. When someone stepped outside their home into the medieval night, the world felt completely different from the daytime. The air cooled almost instantly, brushing gently against the skin with a quiet firmness. Paths that were lively earlier now lay still, covered in soft shadows that stretched between one home and another. Instead of voices and footsteps, there was only the distant sigh of the wind moving through trees and thatched roofs. The darkness didn't feel threatening. It felt wide, still, and patient, as if the village itself were resting beneath the night sky. The ground beneath the feet felt familiar even when visibility was low. People knew every curve of the path, every stone, and every dip in the earth. Years of walking the same routes made the darkness less confusing. Still, movement was slow, deliberate. A person walking at night didn't stride. They drifted, letting their feet guide them more than their eyes. The smell of cool earth mixed with faint traces of wood smoke from distant homes, giving the air a grounding, peaceful atmosphere. Here comes a soft microloop anchor. You can let your mind drift lightly with this scene. No need to hold on to details, just let the quiet settle. In the village center, any remaining activity was minimal. A bucket left beside a well, a tool resting against a fence post, or the silhouette of a cart waiting for tomorrow, each object looked softer in the dim light. With the sun gone, shapes blurred, edges softened, and the entire world seemed wrapped in a velvety stillness. In more open areas of the village, moonlight, when present, acted as the only natural light source. It spread gently across rooftops, fields, and wooden fences, creating a pale glow that made objects visible enough to navigate. On nights when clouds covered the sky, the darkness felt thicker, more complete. But people were used to it. Their daily routines had shaped an instinctive understanding of how to move through low light, and the quiet encouraged a slower, calmer pace. Some listeners might imagine these streets feeling empty or eerie, but in truth, they were usually peaceful. Nighttime wasn't seen as a time for wandering. It was simply a pause in the rhythm of life. Most homes were closed, their shutters pulled tight, with faint glimmers of firelight occasionally escaping through cracks. These tiny beams of warm light acted almost like gentle markers, reminding anyone outside that others were resting safely inside. Another gentle anchor. Notice how your breathing softens with the slow, steady pace. In the distance, the sounds of animals could drift across the night, perhaps the shifting of a horse in a stable, the soft bleat of a goat settling into straw, or the quiet flutter of a night bird. These sounds weren't loud or sudden. They blended into the background, forming a natural nighttime orchestra that calmed more than startled. Each sound told the familiar story of a village resting. For those who walked late, carrying a small lantern offered limited visibility. Medieval lanterns weren't bright. They glowed faintly, lighting only a short circle around the user. The light flickered with each step, revealing bits of the path and then gently fading back into darkness. People didn't rely on lanterns to illuminate everything. They used them just enough to avoid stumbling. The idea of needing bright light to feel safe simply didn't exist. Paths leading to fields or grazing areas were even quieter. Grass brushed softly against the ankles, and the land opened into wide silhouettes of hills and trees. Without city lights, the sky overhead appeared vast and layered with stars, sometimes more stars than one could count. Many people looked up for a moment before continuing their walk, letting the immensity of the night sky bring a gentle sense of calm and humility. The sounds of nature grew louder the farther one moved from the village center. Crickets called from the grass, leaves rustled, and the occasional breeze whistled lightly through tree branches. These sounds formed a kind of slow, rhythmic environment that encouraged the mind to wander peacefully. Nothing demanded attention sharply. Everything unfolded at the pace of night. Another anchor settles in. If your thoughts drift somewhere else for a moment, that's perfectly fine. Let them drift and return when they want to. Even the small bridges or wooden crossings took on new shapes in the dark. The boards beneath the feet made soft creaks, and the sound of water beneath them flowed steadily, echoing faintly into the night. The gentle movement of water had a soothing quality, reminding anyone passing by that life continued quietly around them. Near the edges of the village, homes were spaced further apart, making the darkness feel wider and quieter. Only the faintest orange glow from a distant hearth might be seen. These areas allowed the night to feel more expansive, almost like stepping into a dreamlike space where time slowed and thoughts stretched out comfortably. Walking here felt like drifting between wakefulness and rest. In some areas, tall grasses swayed in the wind, creating soft, brushing sounds that resembled whispers. The movement of these grasses made the landscape look alive, yet gentle. Someone walking past might pause for a moment, not because they were frightened, but because the scene felt strangely calming. The night encouraged reflection, the kind that comes naturally when the world grows quiet. Another microloop arrives. Take a slow breath and let the image settle. You don't have to stay fully alert. On certain nights, the scent of freshly cut hay or damp soil drifted through the air, carried by the breeze. These scents were subtle, but comforting. They reminded people of their connection to the land and the cycles of work and rest that shaped their daily lives. At night, these smells became even more noticeable because the world had fewer distractions. Even when someone walked alone, the village never felt empty. The presence of homes, animals, and familiar landmarks created a sense of belonging. The quiet wasn't a void. It was a gentle pause before the next day's movement began. Nights like these offered a stillness that allowed the mind to rest long before sleep arrived, making the night itself a companion. As the night deepened, the village paths grew colder, and the air settled into a steady, quiet chill. Anyone walking at this hour felt the coolness around them, pressing gently against their clothing. The darkness didn't rush or startle. It simply existed like a calm, open space. Footsteps softened against the dirt, and each step felt more deliberate than the last. People learned to move lightly to avoid waking others or disturbing animals. This slow, mindful walking made the entire world feel unhurried, as though time had stretched itself to make room for rest. In the areas where trees lined the paths, the branches formed loose canopies above. Moonlight, when visible, filtered through them in gentle beams that touched the ground like pale threads. Each shift of the leaves made these beams quiver softly. The combination of faint light and rustling foliage created an atmosphere that felt peaceful, almost like walking through a quiet lullaby. These tree-lined paths were familiar to villagers, and passing through them at night felt like moving within a living, breathing shelter. Another soft microloop anchor. Allow your mind to drift like those branches swaying overhead. On certain nights, distant lights from nearby homes glowed faintly, creating small warm dots in the darkness. These glimmers weren't bright enough to illuminate the path, but they served as comforting markers, signals that life continued inside each home. The contrast between the cool outdoor air and the imagined warmth indoors made the night feel balanced, full of subtle harmony. There were moments when the night felt incredibly still, almost suspending every sound. But then, out of the quiet, a small noise would emerge, a gentle breeze shifting the grass, a bird adjusting its wings, or a distant dog giving one soft bark. These tiny disruptions weren't jarring. They were reminders of life's ongoing movement, even during the quietest hours. In their own way, these sounds helped people relax more deeply, knowing the world around them lived peacefully. Near the edges of the village, where fields opened into wider spaces, the sky looked enormous. Stars scattered across it in thick patterns, brighter than modern eyes are used to. With nothing blocking them, the stars appeared clearer, more numerous. People often paused when walking through these open areas, tilting their heads upward to appreciate the vastness above. This simple gesture, looking at the sky, offered a moment of quiet humility and grounding, reminding them of their place in the world without overwhelming the senses. Another anchor arrives like a slow breath. You don't need to focus closely. Just let the imagery drift around you. The fields themselves changed at night, too. Grass swayed rhythmically, and crops rustled gently in the breeze. Even the soil had its own scent at night, cool, earthy, and calming. These natural smells added depth to the nighttime experience. They helped guide people home, not through sight, but through familiarity. The land carried memories of daytime work, and at night, it returned those memories in soothing form. Sometimes, a person walking the path might hear the distant flowing of a stream. Water's movement sounded different at night, slower, deeper, more resonant. The gentle current brushed against rocks and banks, creating a natural lullaby. Passing by such sounds gave travelers a sense of comfort, as though the landscape itself was offering guidance. Water's steady rhythm blended seamlessly with the quietness of night, helping minds settle into a peaceful state. Closer to barns or animal shelters, faint movements echoed through the dark. A hoof shifting in straw, a soft snort, or a gentle rustle from animals settling deeper into rest. These sounds were familiar companions, reassuring anyone nearby that the animals were calm and safe. People depended on these creatures, cared for them, and in return felt comfort in knowing they were resting well. The presence of animals added warmth to the night, even if only through sound. As one moved back toward the heart of the village, the paths became more compact again. Homes stood closer together, forming a quiet cluster of silhouettes. Wooden fences framed the walkways, their outlines blending softly into the darkness. Occasionally, a loose shutter knocked lightly in the wind, creating a periodic sound that blended with the night rather than disrupting it. This closeness made the village feel like a single, shared space where everyone rested under the same blanket of night. Another gentle microloop. If your eyes are growing heavy, allow them to. You don't need to resist. The world described here is meant to quiet the mind. As someone near their home, the familiar creak of their own door or the soft crunch of earth beneath their feet signaled the end of their brief walk. The transition from night air to indoor warmth felt like stepping from one world into another, one calm and vast, the other warm and enclosed. Inside the home, the glow from the hearth completed the return journey. Darkness loosened its hold, replaced by the soft amber light that had been waiting. The sounds of the night faded behind the closing door, and the stillness inside felt more intimate. The person might take a deep breath, letting the warmth settle over them in contrast to the cool air outside. It was a moment of quiet gratitude for the comfort waiting within. In these late-night moments, reflections often drifted through the mind naturally. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded attention sharply. The slow walk, the cool air, the distant sounds, all of it prepared the body and mind for rest long before lying down. The transition from dark streets to warm home created a gentle pathway toward sleep. By the time the person settled near the fire or onto their bedding, the night's calmness had fully taken hold. The quiet outside blended seamlessly with the warmth inside, creating a comfortable environment where thoughts could soften. The rhythms of the night, from the rustling trees to the glowing embers, served as a gentle reminder that rest was not just allowed, it was welcomed. Night in a medieval village carried its own gentle soundtrack, unfolding slowly as the world settled into rest. Without engines, busy roads, or artificial noise, every sound had space to spread. The calm began with the soft hush of wind brushing across rooftops and moving through narrow gaps between homes. It wasn't a sharp sound, more like a constant, comforting whisper. This subtle movement of air shaped the village's nighttime rhythm, telling anyone awake that the world outside was peaceful and calm. Inside homes, the low crackling of the hearth added a warm counterbalance to the cool, quiet outdoors. The fire didn't roar, it murmured. Each tiny pop from the embers echoed softly against wooden beams, giving the room a heartbeat that pulsed gently through the darkness. People often fell asleep to this steady rhythm, finding comfort in its familiarity. The glow and sound worked together to calm the senses, like a quiet lullaby built from warmth and wood. Here comes a gentle microloop anchor. Let your breathing match the slow rhythm of these sounds. You don't need to hold on to every detail, just settle into the feeling. Outside, animals added soft layers to the nighttime atmosphere. A horse shifting in its stall, the faint bleat of a goat, or the quiet rustle of chickens adjusting their feathers, each noise carried faintly through the cool air. These weren't startling sounds. They were part of the natural rhythm of the village, reminders that life continued peacefully even after the sun had long disappeared. Sometimes, dogs barked once or twice in the distance, not out of alarm, but as part of their instinct to respond to movement or other animals. The sound traveled through the still night air in gentle waves, reaching homes across the village. After a moment, the quiet returned, even deeper than before. The brief interruption made the stillness feel richer, like the night had taken a long, content sigh. Closer to forests or woodlands, insects added a soft, steady chorus. The chirping of crickets blended into a calm, repetitive rhythm that filled open spaces. People rarely paid conscious attention to these sounds. They became part of the night's natural hum. The steady repetition made falling asleep easier, guiding the mind into slower, more restful patterns. Nature provided what modern people might call white noise, helping the village drift into deep rest. Another soft anchor arrives. If your thoughts wander, let them. They can move like the wind through tall grass, returning at their own pace. In areas near rivers or streams, water contributed its own soothing melody. The flow was gentle at night, carrying a smooth, continuous sound as it moved over stones. This natural music helped calm anyone passing by or listening from a nearby home. Even from a distance, the steady movement of water brought comfort, reminding villagers that their environment supported them quietly and steadily. Occasionally, the wooden structures of homes shifted slightly as they cooled from the day's warmth. These small creaks were natural, caused by settling beams and shrinking fibers. Instead of sounding unsettling, They acted as soft reminders that the home was alive in its own subtle way, breathing out the heat of the day and preparing for the coolness of night. People grew accustomed to these noises, recognizing them as gentle signals that everything was in its proper place. The faint rustle of clothes drying near the hearth or the soft brushing of blankets as someone moved in their sleep added even more texture to the soundscape. Every noise stayed low, gentle, and familiar. Nothing sharp cut through the calm. In this environment, people didn't search for perfect silence. They embraced a tapestry of tiny sounds that made nighttime feel safe and complete. Another microloop anchor. Take a slow breath and allow your shoulders to loosen. Just like those small sounds in the night, you don't need to force anything. Some nights carried the distant echo of footsteps, perhaps someone finishing a late task or checking on animals. These steps were light and unhurried, blending seamlessly with the village's rhythm. The sound of shoes or bare feet against packed earth had a soft, padded quality that carried far in the quiet air, then disappeared gently into the silence. Wind passing through nearby fields contributed its own patterns. It moved through long grasses, producing a gentle swaying sound, soft, repetitive, and soothing. When the breeze grew slightly stronger, it created waves across the field, making the grasses whisper together in a calm, unified motion. People familiar with the land could easily recognize the sound, letting it guide their thoughts into a peaceful drift before sleep. Even in the deepest parts of the night, occasional animal calls reached the village, an owl gliding overhead, a fox stepping quietly through the undergrowth. These sounds were rare enough to feel special, yet common enough not to disturb rest. They reminded people of the wider world surrounding their home, a world that remained active in delicate, unobtrusive ways. Inside the home, breaths from family members formed a soft, collective rhythm. The slow inhale and exhale of people resting in the same room provided comfort. It created a sense of togetherness, especially on cold nights when warmth and closeness mattered. This shared breathing pattern shaped the nighttime atmosphere, making the room feel like a single, calm space ready to cradle everyone in sleep. Near the hearth, the glow of dim embers sometimes shifted enough to create a faint crackle. The red-orange light flickered upward, painting barely visible shapes on the walls. These gentle visuals worked together with the night sounds to calm the mind further. The longer one watched, or simply felt the glow, the quieter the thoughts became. As the night reached its quietest hours, the combination of sounds inside a medieval home softened even further. The fire had usually burned down to a glow, leaving behind embers that gave off a slow, steady crackle. These tiny sounds were gentle enough to blend with the steady breathing in the room, creating a warm harmony of calmness. The low hum of settling wood beams added a faint backdrop, making the space feel alive in a peaceful, predictable way. People resting nearby often found themselves drifting more deeply as these sounds guided their senses into stillness. Outside, the village's silence grew thicker, yet never empty. Occasionally, a small breeze would pass through, brushing against shutters or nudging loose pieces of wood. These taps and soft movements were part of the night's natural rhythm, not interruptions. They signaled nothing alarming, just the world gently shifting as temperatures dipped. The night air carried these sounds farther than daytime winds, stretching them softly across the open fields and pathways before letting them fade into the darkness. Here comes a gentle microloop anchor. If your thoughts float away, let them. You can always return to the soft rhythm of the night. In the distance, a stream or river might continue its steady flow, but at a slower, quieter pace than during the day. The sound of water moving over rocks felt soothing and almost hypnotic. Even when heard faintly from homes or paths, the water's rhythm acted as a natural guide toward restfulness. Many people grew accustomed to falling asleep with this background melody present through their entire lives. Deeper into the village, the muffled sound of animals shifting in their shelters added warmth to the silence. A cow adjusting its position in straw, a sheep giving a soft exhale, or a chicken rustling gently beneath its wings all contributed to the sense that everything around was resting together. These noises were familiar and comforting, signals that the animals were calm and safe. Their slow, steady movements made the night feel complete, as if every living thing had found its place in the dark. Wind moving across fields created a soothing wave-like sound, brushing through rows of crops and clusters of tall grass. The movement came in slow pulses, almost like breathing. When the breeze slowed, the night held its breath for a moment, deep and still. Then the wind returned, carrying the rustle forward again. This natural cadence mirrored the steady inhaling and exhaling of sleeping villagers, creating an atmosphere where everything, from people to plants, seemed to share a single, calming rhythm. Another soft attention anchor arrives. Take a gentle breath. Feel how the night encourages stillness without effort. In some homes, small items hanging from wooden hooks would sway lightly when the air moved. These faint clicks or taps were barely audible, but they added texture to the quiet. Cloths, baskets, or simple tools would shift slightly, each adding a tiny sound that crept softly into the darkness. None of these noises demanded attention. They simply existed as part of the night's gentle tapestry. Occasionally, the distant call of a night bird floated across the village. The sound was usually short, echoing softly before fading into the dark. Night birds weren't constant companions. They appeared briefly, almost as if checking in before disappearing again. Their calls gave a sense of depth to the night, reminding anyone listening that the surrounding land stretched far beyond the small boundaries of the village. The roofs of homes sometimes creaked as the temperature continued to drop. These sounds were predictable and familiar, caused by wood contracting in the cool air. Families understood these sounds well and never viewed them as troubling. The soft creaks added to the nighttime atmosphere, helping mark the passage of hours as the world slowly cooled. Each small shift in the structure felt like the home adjusting itself for sleep along with the people inside. Another microloop settles gently. You can let your breathing match the slow rhythm of these nighttime sounds. Nothing in the scene requires attention. It's all designed to lull. Within some homes, the faintest sound of someone turning in their sleep could be heard. Blanket shifting, fabric brushing softly, a quiet sigh. These subtle movements created a reassuring sense of presence. Even when eyes were closed, the room felt full of life, but peaceful life, shaped entirely by rest. If the fire happened to release a final soft pop, the ember spark would flicker for a moment before settling back down. This tiny burst of sound and light felt like the last note of the night's melody, a gentle reminder that the world would remain calm until morning. The glow slowly dimmed, guiding the room deeper into shadow, preparing everyone for uninterrupted sleep. As the night progressed, the collective sounds, wind, embers, breathing, rustling, merged into a single atmosphere of serenity. Nothing felt sharp or sudden. Every sound eased into the next, forming a seamless blanket of calm that supported rest. The village wasn't silent. It was simply peaceful, shaped by the natural world and the routines of simple living. As evening settled and the last traces of daylight faded, medieval households entered a slow, familiar rhythm of preparation. These routines weren't rushed or complicated. They were steady, practical steps taken to ensure comfort through the long hours of night. Someone might close a wooden shutter, another would bring a bucket of water near the hearth for morning use, and someone else would place tools in safe corners where they wouldn't be stepped on in the dark. These movements created a gentle choreography that signaled the shift from day to rest, like a home settling into a comfortable sigh. Inside, the warm glow of the fire guided these small tasks. Families moved through the room with ease, careful not to disturb the calmness that had settled. The fire's soft crackling acted almost like a pause between actions. Place a pot, hear a pop from the embers, fold a cloth, hear a gentle shift in the coals. These tiny sounds anchored the evening, adding a sense of rhythm that made the tasks feel unhurried and reassuring. Daily work might have been tiring, but the night's preparations brought a sense of closure. Here comes a soft microloop anchor. Allow your thoughts to slow down as the room's pace slows too. There was no pressure to finish quickly. In fact, rushing would have felt out of place in such a quiet setting. Families prioritized tidiness not for aesthetic reasons, but because organization made morning smoother. A carefully placed tool, a bucket moved closer, or a garment hung near the fire to dry meant fewer concerns when waking early. These routines held layers of wisdom passed down through generations. Children played a small role in these preparations as well. A young one might carry a small bundle of kindling to refill the stockpile for the next day. Another might help gather blankets or smooth out a straw mattress. Their tasks were simple enough to handle, yet meaningful enough to give them a sense of belonging. Evening routines weren't assigned like chores. They were shared habits, performed together as part of family life. As the fire warmed the room, someone might check the edges of the hearth to make sure no loose sparks rested near dry wood. The fire needed to burn safely through the night, offering warmth without danger. This careful attention wasn't fear-based. It was responsible, a sign of respect for the home that sheltered them. Ensuring safety in such a quiet moment fostered a deeper peace, one that helped everyone rest more easily. Another gentle anchor. Let the steadiness of this preparation soften your breathing. As the room dimmed further, families often adjusted their seating. Someone might pull a small bench closer to the fire, while others spread cloths over the floor to organize small tasks. These movements created soft rustles, subtle shifts of fabric, and wood that blended into the evening soundscape. Even the creaks of the home felt appropriate, as though the structure itself was settling into rest alongside its occupants. Clothes worn throughout the day were hung on pegs or draped near the hearth to dry. Many garments carried traces of fieldwork, dust, or the cool scent of outdoor air. Warmth from the fire gently lifted these scents, making the room smell of earth, wood, and faint traces of smoke. The mixture was comforting, a reminder of daily effort blending into nightly rest. People didn't aim to mask these scents. They recognized them as familiar markers of their lives. Simple tools used during the day were wiped clean and placed back where they belonged. A wooden spoon, a knife, or a spindle might be set on a table or on a shelf carved into the wall. These tools would be used again the next day, so placing them with intention avoided morning clutter. The simple act of cleaning and storing items brought a sense of calmness, allowing the mind to transition gently towards stillness. Another microloop arrives quietly. If your thoughts drift, let them drift softly. In many homes, small baskets held grains, vegetables, or dried herbs. Families checked these stores as part of the evening ritual, counting what was left, planning what might be needed tomorrow, ensuring that nothing essential had been forgotten. These checks were simple, but they anchored the household in order and stability. Predictability made nights restful, and routine made mornings easier. Children's bedding was prepared next. Straw mattresses were fluffed or shaken slightly to let air move through them. Light blankets were spread over them, sometimes warmed briefly near the fire first. The soft rustling of straw and cloth created a gentle sound that many found soothing. Children often watched these preparations with heavy eyes, already feeling the pull of sleep as the room grew warmer and quieter. Adults, too, arranged their bedding during this time. They placed layers of straw or wool blankets where they would sleep, paying attention to comfort as much as practicality. Lying close to one another helped preserve warmth, especially during colder seasons. The way they prepared their bedding showed a balance between careful planning and simple comfort, an understanding that rest required attentiveness, even in modest homes. As these routines continued, the atmosphere grew heavier with calm. Tasks became smaller, slower, and more deliberate. The glow of the hearth dimmed slightly but still offered enough light to finish the final preparations. Nothing loud or sudden interrupted the process. Each action contributed to the sense of closing the day neatly, placing a gentle boundary between work and rest. Another soft anchor. Take a slow breath and notice how the scene encourages calmness. Near the end of these routines, someone might step outside briefly to bring in a final item or check on an animal. The cool night air contrasted sharply with the warm home, creating a refreshing moment before returning inside. When the door closed again, the warmth settled instantly around them, enhancing the comfort of the final tasks. As everything found its place and the room returned to stillness, families gathered closer to the hearth for a final moment together. Someone might stretch their arms, another might smooth a blanket, and children might nestle into their bedding. The room reflected all the day's effort now placed gently aside. Evening routines had served their purpose, clearing the mind, settling the space, and guiding everyone slowly toward the quiet of night. As the final tasks of the evening began, the home grew quieter, almost as if it understood that rest was approaching. People moved with slower motions, their steps softer, their gestures gentler. A pot might be set aside for morning cooking, placed in its familiar spot where it would be easy to find at sunrise. A wooden ladle could be wiped once more, just to ensure cleanliness. These final touches didn't feel like chores. They felt like easing the home into a peaceful state, preparing it to cradle its occupants through the long stretch of night. A soft microloop anchor arrives. Let the rhythm slow with these small, closing gestures. Someone might lift a piece of cloth to fold it neatly, shaking off dust or smoothing its creases. The sound of fabric folding carried softly through the dim room, blending with the crackle of embers. Even the smallest motion created a sense of completion, like placing the last piece of a gentle puzzle. When a tool was hung on its peg or a basket was nudged into its corner, it added to the feeling that everything had found its resting place. Adults sometimes checked the fire one last time, ensuring it was safe and steady. They might shift the log slightly, letting the embers settle into a glowing bed that would hold warmth for hours. The glow illuminated their faces with soft gold, smoothing their features into calm lines. The fire gave just enough comfort to make the night feel secure, but not so much light that it disturbed the atmosphere of rest. The hearth remained a guide, quiet, steady, warmly present. Children, already drowsy, often watched these final preparations with half-open eyes. They might nestle deeper into their blankets, feeling the heat of the room gently envelope them. The soft murmurs of adults finishing their tasks floated through the room like a lullaby. Even without touching them, the atmosphere encouraged sleep. The sense of safety, order, and warmth created a natural pathway for tired minds to drift downward into comfort. Another gentle anchor. If your thoughts wander, you may follow them quietly, then return when you like. Families sometimes shared a few more words before settling into silence. These words were soft, perhaps a reminder about morning tasks or a comment on the weather outside. Nothing heavy, nothing urgent, just the final threads of communication that closed the day gently. When the words faded, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt full, as though the room was holding everyone in a warm embrace. Near the hearth, items that needed to stay warm, like a covered bowl of broth or a small cloth, were placed close enough to feel the heat without risk. These were acts of care, done not out of ritual but out of understanding. Warmth mattered deeply in these homes, and placing things in the right spot meant they would remain useful the next day. This thoughtful placement was part of the evening's natural flow. The cooling air outside reminded families that nighttime required preparation. Someone might check the door latch, feeling they would settle into place with a reassuring click. This sound meant that the home was secure, sheltered from the wind and the chill. These simple closures created a boundary between the quiet world outside and the warm world inside. Each secured latch, each closed shutter helped deepen the sense of safety. Another microloop settles here. Breathe softly, the way the night breathes through these small motions. Bedding was adjusted with care during these final moments. A blanket pulled a bit higher, a pillow softened, a corner of straw bedding pushed gently back into place. Every small adjustment brought the promise of comfort. People weren't seeking luxury. They were shaping the simplest materials into something familiar and soothing. These touches made sleep easier, helping bodies settle into stillness. As the fire dimmed further, the room took on a deeper shade of amber. The shadows lengthened, merging gently along the walls and floor. This dimness wasn't unsettling. It signaled that the day was fully behind them. Eyes could rest more easily, minds could drift more freely, and the warmth of the hearth softened every remaining tension. The darkness worked with the quiet preparation, guiding everyone deeper into peaceful awareness. For some, this was the moment to stretch their arms or rotate their shoulders, letting the body release the last weight of the day. Muscles softened, breaths deepened, and the body responded naturally to the calming atmosphere. The home's temperature, the scent of wood smoke, and the gentle hush of the room all worked together to soothe every sense. It was a complete experience, a full-body reminder that rest was close. Another soft anchor arrives. You don't need to stay fully awake. Let your breathing move slowly. Outside, the faint hum of nighttime sounds, like distant rustling or the muffled call of an animal, offered a reminder that the world around them rested too. This quiet companionship with nature made the home feel even more comforting. The contrast between the fresh air outside and the warm interior amplified the peace inside the room. The very last actions of the night were small gestures, placing a cup upside down to keep it clean, nudging a stool back under a table, or brushing crumbs from a surface. These tiny touches gave the home a sense of closure. Nothing grand was needed, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the space was ready for tomorrow. As everything settled into place, a stillness filled the room, deep and calming. When families finally lay down, the atmosphere guided them effortlessly. The glow of embers, the soft breaths around them, and the comfort of bedding made from simple materials created a cocoon of warmth and peace. The room seemed to breathe with them, its sounds fading into the background as sleep took hold. Evening routines had done their job. They transformed the end of the day into a gentle path toward deep, natural rest. Sleep in a medieval home unfolded gradually, shaped by warmth, routine, and the soft merging of daily weariness with nighttime calm. People didn't drift into sleep suddenly. Instead, they eased into it, letting their bodies follow the natural rhythm created by firelight and cooling air. The glow of the hearth dimmed slowly, settling into deep orange embers that cast soft shadows across the room. These shifting shapes made eyes grow heavy, inviting rest without demanding it. Sleep wasn't an event. It was a gentle slide into stillness. Families usually slept close to one another, not only for warmth but because it created a sense of safety. Beds, or simple straw-filled mattresses, were placed side by side or arranged around the hearth. The closeness allowed heat to be shared, but it also offered comfort. Soft breaths, slow movements, and the presence of others created a natural reassurance that the night was peaceful. Even in small homes, the shared sleeping space fostered a quiet sense of unity. Here comes a soft microloop anchor. Let your breathing match the slow rhythm of this sleeping room. No need to hold on to details, just settle into the softness. Bedding itself was simple yet practical. Straw mattresses provided insulation from the cold ground, and wool blankets offered warmth. Some families used furs or extra layers during colder seasons. These materials weren't luxurious, but they worked well, shaped by the land and the knowledge passed down through generations. People understood how to layer their bedding to capture and keep warmth through the night. As the village rested, homes grew quieter. The only remaining sounds came from the soft crackling of dying embers or someone shifting lightly on their straw mattress. These movements were slow and subtle, adding to the nighttime soundtrack rather than breaking it. In the dim light, figures became peaceful silhouettes, curled into comfortable shapes. The atmosphere encouraged stillness, and once the last tasks were done, sleep came naturally to most. Different people settled into sleep at different moments. Someone might fall asleep the moment they lay down, exhausted from the day's work. Another might take several minutes, allowing their mind to drift through small reflections before the fatigue finally took hold. But no one rushed the process. Without clocks marking precise hours, time felt flexible. Sleep followed the body's signals, not a strict expectation. Another microloop arrives gently. If your mind drifts, let it drift softly. In some homes, individuals experienced segmented sleep, a natural pattern where people slept for a few hours, woke briefly, then returned to sleep again. This wasn't seen as a problem. The short waking period often felt peaceful, giving people a few moments to stretch, adjust their bedding, or add a small piece of wood to the fire. These middle-of-the-night moments were quiet, reflective pauses rather than interruptions. During these brief wakeful episodes, families often spoke softly if someone else was awake, sharing a whispered thought or simply enjoying the calm. The room wasn't bright enough for tasks, but it was warm enough for gentle conversation. These exchanges didn't disturb the night, they blended into it. The conversations were short and soft, fading naturally as people began closing their eyes once more. The temperature inside the home shifted subtly as the night progressed. The fire cooled, and the air grew crisper. Families instinctively moved closer to one another, pulling blankets tighter or tucking hands beneath layers for warmth. The body's natural response to cooling air made sleep deeper, as breathing slowed and muscles relaxed. The contrast between warm bedding and cool air encouraged even heavier rest. Another anchor arrived softly. Notice how imagining this warmth makes your shoulders ease. Children often fell into the deepest sleep of all. Their breathing became slow and rhythmic, their limbs tucked comfortably beneath blankets. Adults sometimes watched them for a moment before drifting off themselves, reassured by the gentle sound of a child sleeping peacefully. In the quiet, this sound felt like its own kind of warmth. In the earlier part of the night, the faint glow from the fire still reached most corners of the room. But as embers cooled, shadows grew deeper. The room took on a more uniform darkness, one that didn't feel threatening but protective. This darkness carried a sense of privacy, an invitation for thoughts to quiet, for the mind to loosen its grip on the day's concerns, and for sleep to deepen naturally. Some families used small wooden frames or simple cloth hangings to create partial dividers between sleeping areas, especially in homes with several members. These dividers weren't used for privacy in the modern sense, but to create a sense of cozy enclosure. The cloth softened drafts and helped contain warmth. The gentle sway of the hanging fabric sometimes created faint movements that comforted the eye during wakeful moments. Another microloop. If your eyelids feel heavier, allow them to rest. The sleeping space was also shaped by the sense of the room. Wood smoke, straw, wool, and faint traces of herbs used earlier in the evening. These smells were familiar, grounding, and soothing. They signaled that the home was a lived-in place of comfort. People didn't need scented oils or perfumes. They found calmness in the natural environment around them. As sleep deepened, even the small sounds from outside grew fainter. The faint rustling of animals, the occasional breath of wind, and the distant whisper of leaves all faded as the mind drifted further inward. The night soundscape folded into the background, and the body relaxed fully into the warmth of the bedding. The rhythm was slow, steady, and deeply calming. As the deepest part of the night settled in, the room grew almost completely still. The embers in the hearth glowed in a slow, pulsing red, fading bit by bit as the hours passed. This dim light barely touched the edges of the room, but its presence was enough to keep the darkness from feeling empty. It offered a soft reassurance, reminding sleepers of warmth even as the fire cooled. Those who stirred briefly during the night often glanced toward the hearth before settling again, comforted by its quiet glow. Occasionally, someone shifted position on their straw mattress, creating a faint rustle followed by a soft sigh of relief as they found a more comfortable spot. These small movements didn't disturb others. They contributed to the room's natural rhythm. Sleeping close together meant that families shared not only warmth but sound. A quiet turn, a gentle breath, or the slight brushing of blankets felt like part of the night's harmony rather than interruptions. A gentle microloop anchor arrives. Let your mind drift the same way those soft movements drift through the room. Beyond the home's walls, the village continued its slow, resting rhythm. Faint sounds carried across the quiet landscape, a distant animal adjusting in its shelter, a breeze moving through nearby trees, or the subtle creak of a wooden fence responding to the cool night air. These sounds blended seamlessly into the stillness, forming a calming backdrop that supported deep rest. Inside, the cooling temperature encouraged people to pull blankets closer, tuck hands beneath layers, or curl their bodies slightly for warmth. This instinctive response helped create a cozy, enclosed feeling within the bedding. The contrast between the crisp air and the gathered warmth made the sleeping experience even more soothing. The body settled deeper, muscles relaxing as warmth pulled around them. Many medieval families found that night provided rare moments of clarity. When someone woke in the middle of the night, the darkness and silence created space for calm reflection. Thoughts moved slowly, unburdened by daytime responsibilities. Sometimes the brief waking moments felt almost meditative, quiet stretches where the mind could settle before sleep returned. These pauses were natural, not disruptive. Another anchor. Notice how the idea of that slow, peaceful pause gently softens your own breathing. Dreams often drifted in gradually, shaped by the day's labor, memories, or the ambient sounds of the home. The repetitive noises, the quiet breathing, the soft crackling of cooling embers, the faint shifting of straw, guided the mind into sleep that felt grounded and safe. Dreams carried no urgency. They simply formed and dissolved within the calm space of the night. If the fire settled further, someone might rise briefly to add a small piece of wood, moving quietly so as not to wake others. The tiny spark that followed, accompanied by a soft crackle, glowed warmly for a moment before fading into the background again. This act wasn't disruptive. It was a simple gesture of comfort, ensuring that the room would remain warm enough for the remaining hours of sleep. Most people eventually sank into their deepest rest during this part of the night. The home's darkness felt complete, but never threatening. The closeness of family members, the certainty of routine, and the familiar sounds of the room worked together to create a sense of protection. Sleep came easily, wrapping minds and bodies in a slow, peaceful heaviness. Another microloop settles here. Allow your thoughts to blur gently at the edges, the way the night softened every sound and shape. As dawn approached, the sky outside shifted gradually, though the village remained mostly asleep. The world held its breath in the final stretch of night, allowing the last moments of deep rest to settle in before the first signs of morning. Inside, sleepers rarely noticed these first hints of dawn. Their bodies remained still, tucked in warmth, minds resting in the final layers of the night's calm. The faintest changes in light sometimes drifted across the room, but they weren't strong enough to wake anyone yet. The home continued to cradle its occupants, maintaining the quiet rhythm of nighttime peace. As the minutes passed, the night prepared to give way to morning, but for the sleepers, time moved slowly. They remained wrapped in the softness of their bedding, breathing deeply, held by the quiet comfort of shared space and familiar surroundings. Dreams lingered gently, thoughts stayed calm, and the stillness of the home supported every last moment of rest. While most of the village rested, a few people moved quietly through the night, carrying out tasks that required calm rather than daylight. These night workers weren't many, and their roles varied depending on the season and the needs of the community. Their movements were unhurried, shaped by a deep awareness of the silence around them. Their work blended into the night rather than disturbing it, adding soft, purposeful sounds to the sleeping village. One of the most common figures awake at this time was the baker. Long before sunrise, the baker began preparing dough for the morning bread. Inside the small bakery, the warm glow from the hearth lit the wooden table where flour was spread in a soft, pale layer. The gentle sound of hands kneading dough formed a steady rhythm: push, fold, turn, pause. This repetitive movement, combined with the warmth of the fire, gave the space a calmness that matched the quiet outside. Here comes a gentle microloop anchor. Allow your thoughts to soften, the way dough softens under careful hands. The baker's work was peaceful but essential. While others slept, these early preparations ensured the village would wake to food that had been shaped during the quietest hours. The smell of warm flour and rising dough filled the bakery, creating a comforting atmosphere that made the early work feel less like labor and more like a steady ritual. Shepherds, too, sometimes stayed awake during certain nights, especially during lambing season or when weather conditions required extra attention. They moved through fields or shelters with slow, deliberate steps, listening closely to their animals. The soft bleating of sheep or the gentle shifting of hooves created a subtle harmony with the night's natural sounds. Shepherds relied on their senses more than light. Their ears and hands guided them. The cool night air made their breath visible in slow, misty clouds. With each breath, the shepherd felt the land's quiet pulse beneath their feet, a calm, natural rhythm shaped by the wind and the movement of grazing animals. When a sheep stirred, the shepherd responded with patience, adjusting bedding or checking for signs of discomfort. Their presence alone often kept the flock calm. Another anchor arrives. Breathe slowly, as though you're standing in a quiet field at night. Travelers arriving late to the village also moved gently through the dark. Their footsteps were cautious, guided by memory or faint moonlight. They might pause at a gate or lean against a wooden post, taking a moment to let their eyes adjust before finding a place to rest. The night offered fewer distractions, allowing them to appreciate the stillness that wrapped around the village. Inside some homes, a parent might stay awake for a short while after everyone else had fallen asleep, finishing a quiet task such as sewing or carving a tool. These late-night tasks were done not out of urgency but out of practicality. The calm of the night gave them uninterrupted focus. The sound of a thread pulling through fabric or the gentle scrape of wood being shaped flowed softly into the room, blending with the slow breaths of sleeping family members. Village watchmen, when present, walked a simple route through the main paths. Their job wasn't dramatic. They weren't expecting danger, but they ensured that the peace of the village remained undisturbed. Their wooden staffs tapped softly against the earth, creating a steady cadence. They listened more than they spoke, letting the night tell them what was normal and what needed their attention. Another gentle anchor here. Let the rhythm of those soft steps ease your breathing. Occasionally, they checked door latches or glanced at animals resting in nearby pens. The quiet allowed them to notice details that daylight often hid: tiny shifts in the wind, the smell of damp earth, or the distant echo of a stream. These observations helped guide their night walk, shaping their understanding of the village's subtle nighttime patterns. In some households, an older family member might stay awake longer simply because they preferred the quiet hours. They sat near the hearth, watching the glow slowly fade. Their thoughts moved gently through memories, reflections, or simple observations. These quiet moments weren't lonely, they were comforting. The night gave them space to think without interruption. Children occasionally stirred in their sleep, letting out soft murmurs or shifting beneath blankets. A parent still awake might gently adjust a cover or smooth a child's hair before settling again into their own quiet task. These small actions carried deep tenderness, adding warmth to the already peaceful atmosphere of the room. The night also shaped the soundscape of late work. The slow grinding of grain between stones, the brushing of straw as animals moved, or the faint scratch of ink on parchment, each sound existed clearly but softly. Without daytime noise, every task felt magnified in a gentle way, making even the smallest action feel important and grounding. Another microloop rises. If your eyes feel heavier, let them soften. The calmness of these late tasks wasn't accidental. It developed from necessity and rhythm. Those awake allowed their senses to adjust naturally. Their eyes moved slowly, their steps stayed light, and their minds remained anchored in the quiet of the night. The entire village felt like a shared breath, held softly in a moment of rest. As the night deepened, the few people still awake found themselves moving in a world that felt softer and slower than the daylight hours. The stillness shaped their pace, their breathing, and even their thoughts. Someone grinding grain by hand might pause occasionally, letting the faint echo of the stones settle into the quiet around them. The steady circling motion created a rhythm both grounding and calming, an action that carried no urgency, only purpose. Parents finishing small repairs did so with careful hands, guided by the warm glow of the fire. A wooden ladle smoothed with a knife, a loose thread tucked into fabric, or a basket gently reshaped. All of these tasks made soft, intimate sounds. The room around them seemed to breathe with each motion. The dim light softened every curve and corner, creating a cocoon-like atmosphere where even work felt restful. A gentle microloop arrives. Let your thoughts drift, the way shadows drift along walls lit by low firelight. In the bakery, the early stages of dough rising filled the room with a subtle warmth. The baker checked it between tasks, lifting a cloth to make sure the dough rested properly. The scent of fermentation was soft and earthy, promising nourishment for the morning. Each step felt steady and familiar, guided by experience rather than sight. For shepherds tending their flocks during late hours, the sounds of animals created a quiet companionship. A soft bleat, the shifting of hooves, or the subtle brushing of wool against wooden shelters made the night feel full of life, but in a muted, peaceful way. The shepherd adjusted straw, guided a wandering animal back to its place, or simply watched over the herd as the cool breeze swept through the field. Their lantern flickered gently, leaving a small circle of light on the ground. Inside some homes, someone writing or reading might still be awake, using a small candle or firelight to see. The slow scratch of charcoal on parchment felt loud in the quiet room, yet not intrusive. It was the sound of focus, of thoughts being shaped gently onto a surface. These late-night scribes cherished the stillness because the silence made concentration feel natural and unforced. Another microloop rests here. Breathe slowly, like someone tracing words in soft light. Occasionally, someone returning late to the village walked past shuttered homes with careful steps. They made sure not to disturb sleeping neighbors, letting their footsteps fall lightly against the earth. Lantern lights swayed with each step, revealing brief glimpses of fences, door frames, or stacked firewood. These travelers felt a quiet relief when reaching their home, knowing warmth and rest were waiting inside. Watchmen strolling the village continued their gentle circuit. Their ears stayed alert, not out of fear, but out of attentiveness. They listened to the subtle patterns of the night, the wind brushing through narrow alleys, the faint ripple of water in a nearby stream, the occasional creak of a wooden beam settling. These tiny details told them everything they needed to know about the village's condition. Each sound meant things were as they should be. In homes where someone was awake, the glow from the hearth cast long, calming shadows. A person smoothing a blanket or adjusting a pillow did so with slow movements. These final touches made the space feel complete, ready for the deep rest that waited just ahead. The room felt full but quiet, shaped by warmth, routine, and the presence of sleeping family members nearby. Sometimes, a person completing a late-night task paused simply to enjoy the stillness. They might watch embers shift, breathe in the warmth, or listen to the room's subtle noises. These moments weren't distractions. They were tiny rests built into the night. The quiet allowed thoughts to settle into gentle patterns, free from the demands of the day. Another microloop settles. Allow yourself to follow that stillness. You don't need to stay fully alert. In some homes, the flicker of the hearth would cast a soft glow across the floorboards, drawing gentle patterns that moved slowly as the fire breathed. Watching those shapes drift along the room could lull even the most focused night worker toward sleep. Many found that simply sitting near the hearth for a moment was enough to loosen the final threads of wakefulness. As the night reached its quietest point, even those still awake felt the soft pull of rest. Their tasks became slower, their eyelids heavier, and their thoughts began wandering toward tomorrow's work. They set aside their tools, gently covered their projects, and prepared to lie down. The night had guided them, through calm routine, toward the edge of sleep. When they finally settled onto their bedding, the contrast between earlier movement and now stillness felt natural. The warmth of the room, the softness of blankets, and the rhythmic breathing of others helped them slip into rest almost immediately. Their work, done quietly and gently, folded seamlessly into the night. Weather shaped the medieval night more than anything else. Without modern insulation or steady indoor temperatures, every shift in the air could be felt inside homes and across the village. A cold night meant warmth mattered fiercely, tightening routines and drawing families closer to their hearths. A mild night allowed windows to stay slightly open, letting fresh air drift through the room. Each change in weather shaped how people rested, how they prepared, and how the village settled into sleep. On cold nights, the air outside carried a sharp edge. When someone opened a door, even briefly, the chill entered instantly, brushing against faces and collecting around ankles. The ground hardened, the grass stiffened with frost, and breaths appeared in faint, cloud-like puffs. People responded by pulling blankets tighter, pushing bedding closer to the fire, and adding extra layers of wool or fur. The cold didn't stop life, but it shaped the night into something quieter, more introspective, encouraging everyone to stay near warmth. Here comes a gentle microloop anchor. Breathe slowly, the way the cold air slows movement. Snowy nights created their own unique atmosphere. Snow muffled sound, blanketing the village in a soft, muted stillness. Footsteps became gentle crunches, barely audible from afar. Roofs and fences rested beneath white layers that glowed faintly under moonlight. The air smelled clean, crisp, and almost sweet. The quiet created by snow made the world feel paused, as if the village were wrapped in a heavy, calming blanket. Inside the home, snow outside meant careful attention to the fire. Families added thicker logs before resting, ensuring warmth would last through the night. The glow from the hearth became even more precious, drawing everyone close. Cold drafts sometimes slipped through gaps in walls or under doors, but people had learned how to soften them, with hanging cloths, bundles of straw, or simple wooden boards. These small adjustments, passed down through experience, made winter nights manageable and peaceful. Rainy nights had a different rhythm. Rain tapping against thatched roofs created a soothing chorus, soft, steady, and unbroken. The roof absorbed the sound, turning it into a muted drum that rolled gently across the home. Water dripped from eaves, collecting in small puddles outside. The scent of wet earth and wood drifted through the cracks, grounding the senses. For many, the sound of rain became the perfect accompaniment to rest, guiding them into sleep with its steady rhythm. Another microloop arrived softly. Let the rain-like rhythm slow your thoughts. Thunderstorms, though less common, carried their own calming qualities when mild. The distant rumble of thunder echoed across fields and hills, softened by distance. Lightning, when it flickered, briefly illuminated rooftops and tree lines, then faded, leaving darkness deeper and more comforting. People understood these storms, accepted them, and often found comfort in listening to the distant sky moving. On warmer nights, the air felt lighter and carried scents from fields and gardens into the village. The smell of blooming herbs, warm soil, or ripening crops drifted through open windows. The breeze moved gently through homes, brushing against blankets and softening the edges of the room. Sleep came easily on such nights, cool enough to be comfortable, warm enough to prevent shivering. Families spread blankets evenly and stretched out a bit more, enjoying the natural comfort. Even in the countryside, humidity shaped the night. On damp evenings, the air felt heavier and clothes clung slightly to skin. People responded simply, moving slower, keeping bedding lighter, and drinking extra water before settling. The heaviness in the air made breathing slow and deep, guiding the body into a restful pace. Nothing needed to be forced. The environment shaped the night's rhythm naturally. Another microloop anchor. Allow your breathing to follow the warm breeze of a mild night. Windy nights were the most dramatic. Wind swept through narrow paths, rattling shutters and swaying tree branches. The sound wasn't frightening. It was lively, full of motion. People learned to interpret the wind. Gentle breezes meant calm weather, while stronger gusts suggested changes on the horizon. Wind became a storyteller, moving through every corner of the village with purpose. For those awake, wind passing over rooftops created a low hum, like distant singing. It vibrated through wooden beams and rustled through dried herbs hanging near the hearth. The air shifted constantly, making shadows dance quietly along the walls. These small movements kept the room from feeling too still, adding texture to the night without disturbing its pace. Foggy nights were the most mysterious. Fog crept through the village like a soft, grey curtain, lowering visibility to only a few steps ahead. Paths, fences, and trees faded into gentle silhouettes. Footsteps felt quieter, breaths felt closer, and sound travelled strangely, sometimes farther, sometimes not at all. The fog didn't bring fear. It brought a sense of calm uncertainty, a softness that made the world feel smaller and more intimate. Another anchor settles here. Let the image of fog soften your thoughts. Inside homes, foggy nights usually meant cooler air drifting through small gaps. Families responded by adjusting bedding and making sure the hearth held enough warmth. The moisture in the air sometimes made the fire hiss softly, adding a new sound to the room's nighttime symphony. This gentle hiss blended with the quiet of sleep, creating a deeper sense of comfort. Even nights without strong weather still carried a subtle atmosphere. Clear nights meant the stars shone brightly above, guiding the eye and comforting those who stepped outside. The cool air felt refreshing, carrying no heaviness, just clarity. Without clouds, sound moved more freely, making distant noises slightly sharper but still peaceful. The world felt open, honest, and calm. As night continued, the influence of weather shaped not only the environment but also people's thoughts. Calm weather encouraged minds to settle easily, letting sleep arrive without resistance. Harsh weather prompted people to listen more closely, noticing the subtle changes in sound and air. These observations were natural, shaped by generations of experience. Families understood the night through their senses, feeling temperature shifts, hearing distant echoes, and smelling changes in the breeze. Weather was not simply a backdrop, it was an active part of the night's identity. Inside the home, shifting temperatures influenced how families positioned themselves. On cold nights, People instinctively moved closer to one another or pulled bedding more tightly around their shoulders. On warm nights, blankets were loosened and limbs stretched comfortably into open air. These adjustments were small but meaningful, shaping how deeply and comfortably people slept. Every breath carried the imprint of the weather, cooler breaths on cold nights, slower ones on warm evenings. Here comes a gentle microloop anchor. Notice how imagining these temperature changes softens your own breathing. Windy nights could cause doors or shutters to tremble slightly. Families often reassured children by explaining that it was only the wind moving through the village. The rattling blended with other sounds, becoming part of the nighttime rhythm. As long as the hearth remained warm and bedding secure, there was nothing to fear. The wind was simply passing through, shaping the soundscape as it traveled. When heavy rain continued through the night, the steady pattern became a kind of music. The roof absorbed each drop, turning sharp impacts into muted taps. These taps joined into long, flowing sequences, sometimes gentle and rhythmic, sometimes uneven and clustered. Listening to rain helped many people fall asleep, the repetition soothing their thoughts into softer shapes. The sound created a protective feeling, like a barrier wrapped around the home. On nights with clear skies, the air grew crisp and light. A person stepping outside briefly might feel the coolness brush their face, carrying scents of soil, distant fields, or the faint trace of nearby water. The clarity of the air made sounds travel farther, an animal walking, a door closing, or even footsteps on a distant path. Instead of disrupting rest, these distant sounds anchored the mind, giving it something soft and predictable to settle around. Another microloop settles in. Let the clarity of a calm night's air guide your breathing into a slower rhythm. Foggy nights, with their thick stillness, encouraged people to move more carefully. Someone stepping outside might pause for a moment, adjusting to the reduced visibility. The fog held onto sound differently, muting some noises while amplifying others. Footsteps sounded closer, and breathing felt more noticeable. This altered acoustics made the world feel intimate, as if everything had moved closer together. Some nights brought gentle warmth even after sunset, giving homes a cozy stillness. People often left their shutters slightly open, allowing a light breeze to drift through the room. The moving air brushed over bedding and cooled the skin. This created a balance between warmth and freshness that made rest especially deep. The occasional rustle of cloth or slight shift in curtains added small moments of softness to the room's atmosphere. Stormier nights made a deep impression on the senses. Gusts of wind and distant thunder shaped the soundscape into something more energetic. Even then, families knew how to adapt, reinforcing shutters, securing tools outside, and keeping the hearth steady. The sound of thunder rolling across hills carried a powerful but distant presence. After each rumble, silence returned gently, reminding the listener that the storm was far enough away to remain harmless. Another anchor. Let the rolling rhythm of distant thunder soften the edges of your thoughts. On especially quiet nights, the absence of strong weather allowed families to notice subtle details, like the gentle movement of air around the room or faint creaks in the walls. These tiny moments became part of the night's character. Nothing felt wasted. Every sound played a small role in guiding the mind toward rest. Weather also shaped the dreams of those asleep. Cold nights brought dreams of warm fields or crackling fires. Rainy nights brought soft, fluid dreamscapes shaped by the steady rhythm of falling water. Warm nights created airy, wandering dreams that drifted freely. The environment outside wove itself into the mind, turning the night into something sensory, personal, and unique to each sleeper. As the night continued, the weather often shifted gradually. A breeze might calm, rain might lighten, or clouds might drift aside, revealing stars. These slow transitions influenced the home in subtle ways, allowing light to brighten the window or letting the air grow softer. People didn't always wake during these changes, but their bodies felt the difference, adjusting naturally within sleep. When dawn approached, the temperature began to shift just slightly, often cooler in the moments before sunrise. This gentle change helped stir the earlier sleepers, guiding their minds toward waking without urgency. The night had done its work, carrying them through hours shaped by the environment, wrapping their rest in the softness or firmness of weather's touch. Protection in a medieval village wasn't built on walls alone. It relied on routine, awareness, and the quiet cooperation of its people. Nighttime brought stillness, but not carelessness. Even without bright lights or complex alarms, villagers understood how to create safety through simple habits. They respected the rhythm of the night, using calmness as another layer of protection. The quiet itself became a tool, helping them recognize any unfamiliar sound that didn't belong. Paths leading into the village were usually predictable, known to every resident. During the day, people observed who came and went, creating a mental map of familiar faces and expected movements. By nightfall, the absence of activity became reassuring. Silence meant normalcy. A single unfamiliar sound could stand out, allowing villagers to respond quickly if needed. But most nights followed the same peaceful pattern, shaped by trust and attentiveness more than barriers. Here comes a gentle microloop anchor. Let your mind settle, the way these villagers settled into night with quiet confidence. Families secured their homes with simple latches or wooden bars. They didn't rely on heavy locks, but on understanding their environment. A properly closed shutter, a door set firmly in its frame, or a tool placed near the entrance. All these small habits contributed to safety. Homes faced inward toward the center of the village, creating a natural sense of connectedness, as if each structure looked out for the next. Livestock shelters were also important to protect. Animals were valuable, and their safety reflected the well-being of the entire community. Shepherds or owners checked on them before sleep, ensuring doors were closed, straw was fresh, and water was within reach. If an animal stirred loudly at night, families could hear it from their homes. The village was close-knit enough that even distant sounds traveled softly through the quiet, acting as a gentle alert system. Watchmen, when appointed, walked the same paths every evening. They didn't carry loud weapons or patrol with intensity. Their presence alone was enough. Their slow, consistent steps signaled that someone was awake, aware, and connected to the night's rhythm. Their ears recognized the usual sounds: rustling grass, settling animals, shifting wood. Anything unusual would catch their attention, but most nights passed calmly. Another microloop arrived softly, breathed with the slow pace of these watchful footsteps. When someone walked the village boundary, they moved quietly, letting the cool night air guide their senses. The darkness wasn't something to fear. It was simply a different form of awareness. Shadows changed shapes, trees leaned slightly in the breeze, and the land carried a serene stillness that watchmen learned to read. A broken twig or a sudden rustle told a story their experience helped interpret. Homes near the village edge were more attentive to outdoor sounds. A family might pause while preparing for bed, listening for a moment to the wind or the distant call of an animal. These checks weren't frantic. They were habitual, born from a lifestyle connected closely to nature. The environment itself acted as part of the protective system. Familiarity with the land and its rhythms made nighttime feel predictable. Fences and gates around gardens or small fields were also checked before darkness fell. These boundaries offered basic protection from wandering animals, keeping crops safe through the night. Their wooden frames creaked softly in the cool air, becoming part of the evening's transition. A gate swinging slightly in the breeze wasn't alarming. It was simply a reminder that the land and structures shifted gently as temperatures changed. Another anchor. Let the sound of a softly creaking wooden gate ease your thoughts. At night, even the smallest details mattered. A bucket left near a stable, a tool resting by the door, or a loose plank could signal movement, even if only from the wind. Villagers paid attention to these things, understanding that awareness was more effective than force. Observing the night calmly, without panic, helped maintain safety naturally. Smoke rising from a hearth acted almost like a beacon during the early part of the night. The faint, wavering ribbon of warmth drifting upward could be seen from a distance, marking inhabited homes. For travelers arriving late, these drifting traces of heat guided them towards safe shelter. For villagers, they were signs of life, reminders that people were nearby and settling into rest. In many ways, protection at night came from cooperation. Neighbors trusted one another, knowing they shared the same concerns, routines, and hopes. If someone heard something unusual, they listened closely before reacting. If a traveler approached late, someone inside might notice the footsteps and prepare a lantern. These small gestures reinforced the sense of community, making the village feel united even in the deepest hours of night. Another microloop settles here. Let the idea of a quiet, watchful village soften your breathing. Even animals played a role in nighttime awareness. Dogs, for instance, barked differently depending on what they sensed. A playful bark, a curious bark, or a warning bark each carried its own tone. Villagers recognized the differences, responding calmly based on the sound. These natural signals strengthened the villagers' sense of security. When the night grew deeper, the quietness of the village became its strongest form of protection. Every familiar sound, every breath of wind, every shifting animal, fit perfectly into the nightly pattern people expected. If something didn't belong, it stood out immediately. This awareness wasn't tense or fearful. It was simply the natural attentiveness of people who lived closely with their surroundings. They trusted their senses, letting the night speak in its soft, subtle ways. A gentle microloop anchor arrives here. Let your thoughts settle the way the night settled over these homes. Inside, the glow of the hearth made it easy to notice shadows moving along the walls. If someone approached outside, their footsteps might shift the faint light patterns through cracks and shutters. But most nights, nothing unexpected happened. Shadows remained steady, and the fire's glow drifted quietly across the room. Families rested knowing that calm was the usual state of the night. Dogs continued to play an important role. Their hearing was more sensitive than any person's, and their reactions were familiar to the community. A curious bark meant something small and harmless. A short, sharp bark might signal a traveler approaching. A long, repeated bark meant something was moving near the boundary. These signals weren't alarming, they were communication. Villagers listened, interpreted, and responded with steady awareness. At the edges of the village, natural elements worked alongside people. Thorny bushes planted intentionally near paths discouraged animals from wandering inside. Stones arranged along certain routes created small obstacles that could be heard if stepped on, alerting those nearby. These simple methods relied on the land itself, turning nature into a quiet, protective partner. No complicated tools were needed. The environment played its part. Another soft anchor. Breathe slowly, the way the village breathed under the cool night air. Watchmen, when tired, paused briefly at their familiar posts, leaning against a wooden fence or resting beside a cart. They used these moments to listen more deeply. The absence of disturbance was comforting. The rhythm of wind, insects, and shifting grass confirmed that the village was at peace. Every sound that remained familiar reinforced their confidence that all was well. In certain seasons, families placed simple barriers like fallen branches or wooden beams near entrances to fields. These barriers weren't meant to stop people. They simply made noise if stepped on. A crack, shift, or rustle would sound differently from the usual night chorus. This small trick allowed villagers to sleep more deeply, knowing they would notice anything unusual without needing constant wakefulness. Homes closer to the forest edge paid particular attention to animal movement. They recognized the sound of paws through grass, hooves across dry leaves, or wings fluttering in trees. Most animal visitors were harmless and familiar: foxes, deer, owls. These creatures moved softly and predictably. Only louder or erratic movements signaled caution. But such moments were rare, allowing nights to remain mostly calm. Another microloop anchor flows in softly. Imagine the quiet shifting of leaves helping your mind unwind. Even the construction of homes contributed to nighttime safety. Thick wooden beams, packed earth walls, and tightly thatched roofs insulated sound. Families could sleep deeply without worrying about distant noises becoming overwhelming. The solid structure of the home gave them a sense of comfort, especially during colder or windier nights. Doors crafted from sturdy would fit snugly within their frames. When closed, they produced a familiar sound, a gentle thump that echoed softly through the room. That sound meant safety, separation from the cool air, and the beginning of rest. Once the door was shut, families often felt the day officially end. The home became a cocoon, protecting them from the uncertainties of the night outside. Village pathways created natural lines of defense as well. The narrow alleys, winding routes, and familiar layouts helped residents recognize when something, or someone, moved in an unusual way. The shape of the village itself encouraged awareness. Homes clustered together created pockets of shared sound, where one family's ears supported another's without effort or intention. Another microloop settles here. Let the structure of this quiet village ease your thoughts and slow your breathing. Even the sky provided a sense of orientation. On clear nights, stars gave soft guidance to anyone walking late. The patterns overhead became landmarks as familiar as the paths below. A watchman or late traveler could look upward to confirm direction and feel grounded by the calmness of the night sky. Ultimately, the village's nighttime protection didn't rely on fear or strict vigilance. It was built on harmony between people, land, animals, and the gentle rhythms of nature. Most nights passed peacefully, shaped by trust, routine, and a shared understanding of the environment. Villagers rested with quiet confidence, knowing the stillness of the night worked alongside them. The deepest part of the medieval night arrived quietly, without a clear boundary or moment of announcement. It felt as though the world simply slipped into a softer version of itself. The air cooled further, sounds thinned, and the landscape took on a stillness that felt almost like holding one long, gentle breath. Homes remained wrapped in the last traces of warmth stored from the hearth. Outside, the village seemed to enter a calm pause, waiting patiently for dawn to return. Inside each home, the embers glowed with a faint red hue, casting slow-moving shadows that clung to the floor. These shadows weren't sharp or defined. They drifted like gentle silhouettes, moving in rhythm with the last flickers of heat. The darkness around them wasn't oppressive. It was soothing, like a protective layer that softened every corner of the room. Beds creaked softly as sleepers shifted, but even these sounds blended seamlessly into the stillness. A soft microloop anchor arrives. Let the drift of those fading embers guide your breath into a slower pace. During this time, the entire village seemed to sink deeper into rest. Even animals, so often alert to movement and sound, grew still. Horses breathed steadily in their stalls, their warm breath forming faint clouds in the chill. Sheep nestled into bundled straw, and chickens sat quietly on their perches, feathers puffed in gentle comfort. The combined stillness made the night feel suspended, as if time had softened its edges. Outside, the sky reached its darkest point. If clouds weren't present, stars revealed themselves in astonishing clarity. Tiny pinpricks of light stretched across the heavens, countless and bright. For anyone awake enough to notice, the sight brought a quiet awe, not loud or overwhelming, but the kind of quiet recognition that comes from knowing how vast the sky truly is. The cool air carried every breath with a drifting softness that calmed thinking and slowed the pulse. The coolness of the deepest night affected even the structures of homes. Wooden beams contracted slightly, producing soft creaks that echoed gently. These weren't alarming sounds. They were natural responses to temperature. Sleepers intuitively recognized them as part of the nightly routine. Each shift in the wood felt like the home adjusting itself, making space for the hours of rest to continue without disturbance. Another anchor settles in. Let the quiet weight of the night help your thoughts loosen and drift. On certain nights, a faint breeze slipped through small gaps in the home's walls or roof. It carried the scent of night air, cool soil, distant grass, or even the slightest trace of dampness. This scent wasn't unpleasant. It grounded the senses, reminding the sleeper of the world outside their dreams, a world resting peacefully alongside them. Occasionally, a light rustle could be heard far beyond the houses, a fox moving along the edge of the forest, or perhaps a bird shifting in its nest. These sounds were soft and distant, layered into the landscape like small, fleeting whispers. The villagers, accustomed to such noises, found them reassuring. They were signs that the land was alive but calm, continuing its natural cycles without urgency. Inside the home, breathing created the main rhythm of the room. Slow inhales, gentle exhales, blankets shifting slightly as someone rolled into a more comfortable position. These small patterns formed a shared atmosphere of peace. Even without speaking, families experienced the night together. Each person's rest supported the others, creating a quiet sense of unity in the dim glow of the fading hearth. Sometimes, a sleeper would wake briefly, feeling the deeper cold of the night. They might pull the blanket closer, adjust their position, or glance toward the dying embers before drifting back to sleep. These moments were brief, gentle, and fully expected. The night invited such awakenings without urgency or fear. The darkness felt safe, predictable, and deeply calming. Another microloop anchor. If you find your mind sinking into the dimness of this scene, that's perfectly fine. Let it. In these quiet hours, thoughts move slowly, like ripples spreading across still water. If anyone remained awake, they often sat quietly, wrapped in blankets, listening to the silence. They might think about the previous day, or simply watch the last traces of firelight glow softly before fading completely. These quiet reflections held a softness that daylight rarely allowed. The coldest part of the night often arrived just before dawn. Homes felt the temperature shift first. The air pressed gently against exposed skin, nudging sleepers to burrow deeper into their bedding. This chill wasn't harsh. It was a natural reminder that night had reached its quiet peak. The body instinctively recognized the moment and responded with deeper breaths and heavier limbs. For those who happened to open their eyes during this moment, the room appeared nearly formless. Only the faintest red or orange glow remained near the hearth, barely bright enough to outline a nearby basket or a wooden tool. The darkness felt thick and comforting, like a blanket drawn close over the senses, inviting deeper rest. Another anchor arrived softly. Let the idea of this thick darkness encourage your own calm. As the deepest part of the night continued, the home seemed to hold its breath along with its occupants. No new sounds entered. No movements interrupted the quiet. Everything settled into a suspended stillness that soothed the mind, allowing even the most restless thoughts to grow quiet. The land outside lay in open slumber. Fields, wells, fences, and narrow paths grew faint and nearly indistinguishable from one another. The village rested not only in silence but in complete stillness, as if the world itself was waiting gently for the first light to return. It was a moment of extraordinary peace, a kind that shaped the way families experienced night and welcomed the day that would soon come. As the coldest moment of the night slowly passed, the stillness settled even deeper. Sleepers sank further into their bedding as their bodies adjusted naturally to the shifting temperature. The air inside felt hushed, carrying a kind of softness that made the room feel suspended in time. No footsteps echoed outside, no tools shifted on shelves, only the faint, rhythmic breath of those resting, blending into the quiet like a steady tide gently touching the shore. In the distance, the land held its own muted breath. Trees stood motionless against the dark, their branches barely stirring. Fields, coated with the coolness of the night, waited patiently beneath the sky's heavy blanket. The world didn't feel empty. It felt calm, grounded, and patiently preparing for the first touch of light. Even the earth carried a sense of deep rest, as if everything living had shared the same gentle pause. A soft microloop anchor arrives. Let yourself drift with this pause, the way the village drifted effortlessly through the deep night. Inside the homes, the last embers dimmed into quiet glows, their light shifting toward the color of cooled metal. These faint glimmers were enough to map the outlines of the room, shapes of baskets, sleeping children curled beneath blankets, tools resting quietly. The darkness didn't swallow these shapes. It embraced them gently, softening every angle into something peaceful. In many homes, families slept so deeply that their breath became the loudest sound in the room. Slow inhales filled the quiet air, followed by gentle exhales that warmed the cool space around their faces. These breaths created a shared rhythm that tied everyone together in one cohesive moment of rest. Even the slightest shift, a blanket tugged closer, an arm moved across hay-stuffed bedding, felt like part of that unspoken harmony. Occasionally, a sleeper stirred briefly, their senses picking up on the coolness or the faint glow of the fading fire. They might adjust their position slowly, letting their hand brush the warmth of a nearby blanket before drifting back into a deeper sleep. These micro-awakenings were natural and brief, woven seamlessly into the night's fabric. Nothing demanded urgency, Nothing disrupted the stillness. Another anchor settles here. Let this deep quiet guide your breath into an even slower rhythm. Outside, night creatures continued their soft, periodic movements. A distant owl might glide overhead, wings whispering through the air. A fox slipping past fences created gentle, almost inaudible rustles in the grass. These were peaceful signals that the land remained alive and balanced. Their presence added texture to the night, not tension. As the hour stretched on, the village reached the final layer of its rest. This was the moment where dreams became the most vivid, shaped by warmth, darkness, and the faint sounds of the world outside. People didn't dream in sharp images. They drifted through sensations, memories, and impressions softened by the slow rhythm of sleep. The deepest part of the night held these dreams like cup hands, steady and undisturbed. With each passing minute, the sky began its imperceptible transition, shifting from a heavy darkness to something slightly more transparent. The earliest signs of dawn were invisible to the eye, but the world felt them. The air changed first, gaining the faintest hint of morning coolness. This subtle shift nudged the village from the deepest layer of sleep, stirring minds and bodies without waking them fully. Another microloop whisper, allow your thoughts to float, the way dawn slowly floated toward the horizon. Inside homes, the faint change in temperature signaled the nearing end of night. People slept through it naturally, but their bodies responded with slightly deeper breaths or small shifts beneath blankets. Warm bedding held onto the night's comfort, creating a gentle barrier between sleepers and the growing freshness of the early morning air. Eventually, the faintest light, soft as a brushed stroke of grey, began to appear at the edges of the sky. It didn't wake anyone instantly, but it thinned the darkness. The deep, velvety black slowly lifted into a muted blue. The village remained still, wrapped in the final moments of nighttime peace. Dreams lingered quietly, and the air grew lighter, carrying a whisper of the day that lay ahead. This earliest light brushed softly across the rooftops, touching the thatch with a cool shimmer. It traced the edges of wooden fences and settled gently onto the quiet paths between homes. A rooster might give the first low call, not loud enough to rouse the village, but enough to mark the transition. The world wasn't awake yet, but it was beginning to rise. As the sky continued to lighten, the deep night released its hold. The village remained peaceful, but the stillness shifted subtly. The heavy quiet grew thinner, making space for the day's first sounds, those soft rustles, gentle breaths, and creaks of homes preparing to wake. The profound restfulness of night had done its work, giving every family the calm needed to rise again. And now, as this final layer of night settles gently behind us, a soft reflection arrives. The nights of the medieval world remind us how deeply calm the world can be when darkness becomes a friend rather than a barrier. How quiet routines, small sounds, and shared spaces create a kind of peace that touches the mind slowly and carefully.